looks like we're live. I'm going to go post a stream announcement on Twitter, and then we will go ahead and get started with today's jam stream. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and switch layouts. We good to go. What I did was I put one of the loop track BGMs on in the background while I sort of kick off with the intro for what we're doing today, and then once we actually get started with practice stuff, I'm gonna turn it off. I'm going to experiment a little bit with some higher sound settings on the loop today. Last few streams we've been doing keep coming in with low audio. So I'll be testing out things today as people jump on to see if it's noticeably different or disruptive if I have the sound settings set up this way. But the intent is for me to be able to have a good enough volume on stream here so I don't need to re-edit the broadcasts after and then re-upload them. Because when I do that, I lose the chat. And what I might do in the future if I continue to have problems with the consistency is put the chat on the actual broadcast. That way if I have to re-upload it later, people can see what everyone's talking about. But we should be able to get the sound stuff dialed in. But to sort of break down what I wanted to work on for today's jam stream, this one's going to be... Oh, hey, Edward, what's up? Let's see, kind of quiet. All right, let me see if I can fix that. I'm gonna boost up the mic in OBS. It's gonna probably depend on how close I am as well. When I'm actually doing beatboxing stuff, I'm gonna be a little bit further away. But when I'm talking about here, I'm hitting yellow on the audio readout. So can you give me a sound test with the levels right here with the BGM that I have in the back? If this balance is okay when I'm just talking, then I will make a note. When we're actually working on the loop stuff, I'm going to have the loop tracks up higher so you guys can hear them. But with just the BGM settings like this, let me know if you could still hear me when I'm talking over the background music like this. And then we'll keep it like this for the rest of the stream as far as the settings go. I know if I get really close and essentially almost eat the mic, I get pretty close to red, so I want to avoid being that close, but Hopefully the sound balance is better. I think once I turn off the BGM, it'll be easier to hear me when I'm just doing straight sounds. Okay, you have your volume up. I've got a couple options I can do here. I can boost dynamics and EQ pretty noticeably, and I can hear it in my headphones. It's pretty audible. So if you don't have your main system volume up super high, are you able to hear me now? Because I boosted it by about 15% on the actual loop station, so it's noticeably louder to me in the playback. And the OBS readout has me going way up in the yellow. But I can also be a little further back if I do that. I don't have to get quite so close to my mic. Actually, I'm gonna kill the BGM real quick. It'll be easier to tell if there's anything weird with the sound. Okay. I'll make a mental note. Dynamic and EQ settings are at about 1 o'clock. It's a rotating dial. That's kind of how I remember where I have my sound settings. But what we can do, the way I plan to do this is to run through some warm-up drills like we've done on previous jam streams, and I'm going to spend a section of time just doing pattern practice and sound practice for beatboxing proper. And then after that, we'll go back into the loop station and doing some brainstorming ideas for BGM tracks. I haven't sat down to record the last several we've done. I think I have 2 or 3 from previous sessions I need to actually record and have ready for the next time we do a chill stream. Depending on what we get done today, I will either roll them in the next recording session or the one after that. This last week has been kind of busy since I've been back to work at the Earth job, and I haven't had a whole lot of time. But the last couple sessions worth of BGM tracks, along with at least one from a previous stream, I want to record and put together. And then I'm in the process of editing sort of a compilation video with all of the BGM tracks. Once I decide where I'm going to upload them, if people want to download them and use them for stuff, I'll put that up in a video, and then it'll be out there for people. But with that said, I think we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to be keeping an eye. Yeah, that's right, Edward. I unfortunately have obligations to pay my bills and my rent if I want to keep staying on this planet. But to take a step back, this last week was also my first week back streaming on a regular schedule after being off for a week, and it was good to get back in the swing of things. I forgot on the first one we did this week just how many things I have to keep track of when I set the streams up. But the actual streams themselves went pretty smoothly. So we'll be sticking with the regular schedule. I'm still contemplating when I want to add a fourth day to the week. I plan on doing that eventually, because right now we're doing 3 days a week consistently. Eventually, I'd like to add a fourth one and then figure out what we're going to do content-wise. So that'll be coming. But yeah, it's good to be back. Get back to work. A lot of stuff to get done. Okay, I'm going to start off with some warm-up drills with basic sounds. I do want to do some bass practice. Hopefully it doesn't make my voice wear out quicker this time. I will say that my normal work week schedule really came back to bite me today, because I had a whole plan for how I wanted to get stuff done today before the stream started. But I keep a really, really bad sleep schedule during the week because I'm bad at time management, apparently. So I woke up literally 45 minutes before the stream started. So I was running around trying to get stuff set up and good to go before we went live today. And originally I was planning to be up a few hours earlier so I could get stuff done, eat lunch and all that stuff. But that didn't happen, so I'm almost rolled out of bed directly on stream, and I like to avoid doing that because my brain doesn't get up to full functioning capacity that fast. That's all right. All right, let's start with some warm-ups, and then we'll move into sound practice. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on the audio, so let me know if anything is too quiet or too loud. I have in fact, I'm going to have to turn off the playback for this, otherwise it's going to be incredibly loud in my ears. We'll see. I'm seeing some of the snares hitting red. If I'm I'm decently close to the mic on some of these sounds, I'm seeing it hit red, which doesn't normally do. I want to avoid completely blowing out the mic here. I think if I stay back a ways to about where I'm at now when I'm talking, it's not too bad. But I'm noticing my K's, that seems to be hitting red. But let me know if that's coming in really loud on the audio for you guys. 'Cause I can be further back when I'm talking, or closer when I'm talking, further back when I'm actually beatboxing, because from back here it still gets to the bottom of red, which has to be extremely loud. I don't know how OBS's sound settings translate over to the broadcast, but I imagine if it was deafening and blowing out your speakers, you guys would tell me. So I'm gonna leave it here for now. Just somebody shout at me if I need to turn it down. But I'll do some bass warm up too. We'll do kind of a mix of throat bass and probably chest bass and lip rolls for bass warm up. Let's see. Oh, okay. Thanks, Edward. That's good to know. I'm gonna keep an eye on distance and try and find a consistent place to be when I'm making the sounds. I imagine the ones that are hitting harder, like the kicks and the snares, are gonna probably be most likely to peak for the way they hit the mic. So I'd rather it not do that at all. So instead of being like right here when I'm talking and whatnot, and I'll try and be maybe about 6 inches away from the mic in general when I'm doing sounds, and we'll keep it about there because again, I don't want it to be blasting through. And some of the stuff like we can test for bass. I have to actually look at the readout and see where it's hitting. So for throat bass, that's hitting bottom of yellow. It actually hits higher up on the mic when I'm just talking or making other sounds. With the bass, doesn't seem like it's hitting that high. If I were to do inwards lip rolls, yeah, that doesn't get that close either. It must just be the kind of percussive sounds that are gonna be potentially peaking. And if I'm doing a beat, there's gonna be a lot of percussive sounds. Well, I'm gonna stick to about 5 inches away from the mic in general, and I'll try and keep an eye on it. I think this will be less of an issue when we're doing loop station stuff because most of the sound's gonna be coming from the device, not from the mic. Basically, the device is playing through my system, and the whole thing, including my mic that's hooked up to it, is functioning as the quote-unquote microphone device in OBS. So all the sound is coming through the loop station, but when I'm actually manipulating tracks on here, I can control the sound output from that thing too. So that should be fine. I just don't want the beatboxing itself to be difficult to hear or too loud. But we'll keep the distance about where it is. I'm not going to tweak any of the station sound settings, and we'll keep going. But yeah, thanks Edward for giving me feedback. And you're my unofficial sound technician for streams. Just out of curiosity, Edward, I don't think I've asked you before, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but are you listening to these streams on a mobile device or on a computer? I'm just curious as to how the sound is playing back for you when you're watching, since you're a regular here. And yes, social distancing to avoid potential tinnitus is good. We don't want people to have hearing problems. But I'll go through some warm up drills, some more warm up drills for bass. Okay, that's good to know, Edward. Usually on the phone, sometimes computer. You find that the stream volume for any of my streams is more consistent on one device versus the other. I know for a computer, at least the way I have mine set up, I can just turn my speakers up or down as I need to. But for folks listening on mobile devices, I'd be curious to see if there's any differences in the audio quality if you're using, like earpods or headphones via a smartphone or a mobile device. I'm super paranoid about audio quality. That's the only reason why I ask. But we'll go ahead and continue. We'll work on some bass drills, and I might have to take my headphones off for part of this to make sure I can hear what I'm doing. But we'll go ahead and continue and then get into the actual practice and semi-official sound study for the beatboxing stuff. Just looking at the readout in OBS, I think my spit snares are, of any of the sounds I make, the ones that are most likely to peak hard on the mic, because it's probably the sharpest hitting sound, because just one of that definitely hits red. So I'd be curious to see if that, above anything else I'm doing, sounds different with these higher sound settings. Hopefully not. But I'm going to try not to point directly into the mic when I'm doing those. The way I have this set up, it's directly to the side of my face. And sometimes if I have a sound that comes out of a corner of my mouth, I'll have to turn my head in order to point it towards the mic. But I'm not projecting the sounds directly into it because it'd be even louder if I did that. So I'll try and point a little bit away since I think that one's kind of loud. But I think that's good for warm-ups. Let me try and be better about fixing my caption status here. We'll switch that to sound practice. And for this, I'm going to kind of run through a mixture of pattern practice and kind of an update on some of the sound work we've talked about before. I don't have anything new I wanted to talk through on today's stream. As far as new sounds I wanted to explain, I'm kind of at the point now where I'm just practicing the ones I know and trying to get better at some of the newer ones and more consistent with the older ones. But the one I've been working on a lot off stream whenever I get a chance to practice is the hollow click that I talked about. I think it was last time we had a jam stream. But that's the one that sounds like... It's getting better. I think it's getting closer to the consistency, and I can do it the same way and have the sound come out the same way every time. I still want to get it cleaner, and I still in pattern. have issues with consistency. So just doing it by itself, just the isn't too bad. But the real challenge is when I'm trying to put it into a pattern. So if I was doing something like I lose consistency as soon as I have to do anything more complicated than what you just heard. And that really simple pattern with the hats and kicks and whatever snare I'm using apparently is my go-to. I'm noticing that I tend to do that a lot whenever I have to explain something. But the hollow click is still a work in progress to me. I don't have it quite where I want it, so I'm continuing to practice and working on consistency. I do think one interesting byproduct of working on that sound is it's improving my hollow clops. To recap, the hollow clop is where you just take your tongue and smack it against the floor of your mouth, and then you open your throat to give it more of an echoey reverb on it, and that's how you get the. And I think because I've been working on the hollow click so much, and it still uses your tongue muscle, and it's this very similar movement, it's improving my hollow clops indirectly, which is always nice. But I'm going to keep working on the. And throughout the jam streams, or maybe every other one or so, we'll check in on the development of that sound, and it'll probably start working its way into more routines and patterns over time. One thing I'm not good at doing with that particular technique is speed patterns. Anything faster in BPM than what you just heard me demo tends to get a little bit difficult as far as cleanliness and consistency. So if I were to try and do like a drum and bass pattern using the hollow click, that would be more difficult. But if we were to test it out, I don't think I've ever tried doing that. Like a normal drum and bass pattern with a PF snare would be something like something like that. So if we were to swap out the PF snare for the hollow click, you might get something like and it's functional, but because the mouth position is so much more different compared to the PF snare, which is relatively neutral, and because I've been doing it forever, it's instantaneous that I could add it into whatever sound set I need. In trying to do the hollow click now in that particular drum and bass pattern, I'm losing the hats because my mouth position is different and my tongue is essentially in a different orientation than it would be if I was doing like a PF snare where you don't use your tongue at all. And as a result, you get the kick and you get the click in the drum and bass pattern, but all of the hi-hats that I was doing the PF, the hats are just gone. They're completely lost. So the real challenge will be getting good enough at muscle memory in the hollow click to be able to fit it into more patterns readily, and that's just going to come with practice, I think. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that one. Maybe we can experiment with using that snare in our BGM tracks today, since I haven't done that yet. We can see how it fits into some of the patterns. Maybe if I do something slower for the BGM composition, then we can fit it in that way and see how it affects the overall feel of the songs that we're creating. I also want to experiment around with some lip roll sound effects in the BGM itself. Today's BGM experiments with the loop station, once we get there later on in the stream, is going to be about exploring some other sound incorporations and also commands with the loop station that I've been researching. So today's going to be a bit more experimental. I don't want to get into the habit of doing the same thing every session with the loop station, because the point is to have the amount of sounds we have pretty diverse. All right, Edward, are you telling me that the PF snares are coming in really high? I actually wasn't looking at the readout when I was doing that, but the I may have been pointing towards the mic for that drum and bass example I did. If that sound is coming in high, let me know. In fact, I may have to be further away in general since I use that snare a lot. I know if I'm really close and I do the PF from like maybe about here, it's gonna hit red. But that's kind of close to the mic. I'm further back now. But let's see. I'm gonna test it again. Okay, yeah, that does peak pretty high. Okay. Let me drop that down a little bit. It's difficult trying to balance sound here for beatboxing because if I was doing nothing but beatboxing and I wasn't talking, then I wouldn't have to worry too much about the sound balance. But because I'm doing a mixture of both, I need to make sure the sound isn't blowing out one way or another. All right, so let me get back to about 5 inches away. And I'm going to keep it on the readout this time. Test the PFs. Maybe it would help if OBS wasn't on a monitor that I have to look over for in order to see. Let me do that. That'll make it easier for me to tell what I'm doing. Because I don't really have anything on my front-facing monitor that my webcam is mounted on. Usually, if I'm doing something like a game or whatnot, it's on my front-facing monitor. But I'm going to put OBS on that monitor so I can just look down at the sound readout. All right. All right, it's not getting in the red there, so let me know if it still sounds weird. All I did was drop the mic settings down a little bit, and I'll try and get a little closer when I'm talking, and then I'll just back off like I've been doing. But like I was saying a second ago, I do want to try and incorporate some lip roll sound effects into the loops, which is not something I've really done at all. But I've been trying to figure out the best way to do that, since for inwards lip rolls, that's pretty versatile. You can do a lot with that. The regular dry lip roll, which I use from time to time, or that one, it's a little more difficult to change pitch with that sound, and it tends to sound the way it does by default. So we'll see if we can find a way to work that into the actual BGM tracks. It could work as like a intermediate sound effect or like a synth line essentially. But that one's difficult to change the pitch of. For the inwards lip roll, I can go up and down. I can do the siren one that I usually do, or the lower one, which is the. That's not hard to do, but the dry one tends to be a little bit less flexible. So we'll see. But yeah, today's loop station session will be trying to focus on experimenting around and seeing what we can do, so we can get some more track diversity and keep things from getting stale. There's a couple commands that I was watching some tutorials on that I'm going to attempt to see if I can figure out today. I need to do more research. There's a couple beatboxers out in the scene that I've been watching closely for loop station stuff. And I've been kind of using that as reference material for when we get together to do the jam streams like this. So as I learn more commands and more advanced things, then I'll bring them to the jam sessions and can incorporate that into the loop station stuff. So let's see. I think what we can do now is work on some just general pattern and freestyle practice. I'll kind of jump around between a bunch of different sounds and techniques, and at the same time I'll be keeping an eye, now that I have the OBS readout right in front of me, I'll be keeping an eye on how it hits on the mic and make sure the levels aren't all over the place. But I'll just continue to monitor and we'll see what happens. So let's see. Maybe we can start adding bass into the mix and just sort of do like an extended freestyle. We'll start there. Real quick, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to try and take my headphones off for this entire freestyle bit for a while and see if it changes the way I'm doing sounds. Because I usually have my headphones on the whole time when I'm doing these jam streams. And like I talked about before, it changes the way the sounds are hitting my ears. It doesn't affect anything you guys hear on the stream, but it does affect the way I hear what I'm actually doing. So I'm going to try and take it off and see if it makes it easier for me to follow my own sounds. And that's probably hard to understand the way I'm explaining it here, but it definitely affects my basses. So I'm going to try and take these off just for the next stretch, and we'll see if that makes a difference. All right. Everything should be fine on the mic. All I need to do is put my headphones on my desk. So I'll keep working through some freestyle stuff, and I'm going to continue to monitor audio. So let's see. Yeah, I think it's pretty common for people to have their audio signals different when they're wearing headphones, Edward. I know for probably singers and other musicians, when you're hooked up via equipment in the studio, it's going to sound different, especially if you're putting sound through something like an external sound system or monitor, and it's coming in through your headphones, it's going to sound different than when you're just sitting in an empty room by yourself. And that's definitely noticeable whenever I'm working on beatboxing stuff. The headphones are the most important for the loop station work when we're doing stuff with that, since I can't hear the sound unless I've got my headphones in for the loop. Since it's not playing out of my computer speakers, it's playing through the device itself. But for beatboxing, the headphones aren't that important. I just keep them on out of habit, since I normally have my studio headphones on when I'm doing streaming in general. But I'll experiment a little bit with keeping them off. It makes it easier for me to hear what I'm doing. For whatever reason, my low range in my bass is suffering a bit today. You can hear my voice. If you're not wearing headphones, you should take them off your model. Yeah, that's true. I can do that too. The main reason why I have headphones on the model is to signify that I'm doing music-related content. But the thing is, if I didn't mention that I took off my actual physical headphones, you guys wouldn't know. But for the sake of theming, since that's why I have that feature on this model, I'll leave them on for now. Since for anything music, beatboxing, or what have you related, that's why I have them on. But that's a good point, Edward. If I had a way to make it so that my model took the headphones on and off the same way I do here behind the mic, that would be kind of a cool feature to have. But I don't think these rigs code that way. The webcam would have to be able to tell that something is being taken off my head, and I don't think a feature like that works on 2D models. It might for 3D models, but probably not for 2D. But we'll see. That'd be a cool feature to integrate into VTuber rigs. But I'm gonna continue to do some pattern practice. Yeah, exactly, Edward. My low range for my bass is usually pretty consistent. The difference is I'm doing a lot of talking at the same time. So I think it's putting more stress than normal on my voice because I'm talking a lot and I'm having to do sounds. But like my throat bass, if I were to test my range on throat bass, upper range, without trying to push it super high, is usually about... That's about where I can comfortably do it without really pushing my throat. If I drop the throat bass lower before it starts to bottom out in range, it goes down to about... About there. That's where we've talked about on previous streams. But lower than that is when it switches to vibration. And now that I have my headphones off, I can hear it when it switches a little bit more. But the vibration bass lower register goes from to... This is with mouth closed. And then the vocalized chest bass for me, that one doesn't really suffer too much because it's not using my throat for the actual sound. It's using my voice. So for the whoa, 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 that's vocalized chest, and that can usually drop down a little bit lower. So it'd go whoa, 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 now, whoa, 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 I had my OBS minimized. I probably shouldn't have done that. Still seeing high peaks on the spit snares. I need to watch that. But I think it just depends on what I'm doing. Normally when I'm practicing off stream and doing kind of whatever, I don't have any issues with the lower range of bass. I think it's mostly just under a bit more stress when I'm here talking on camera. I'll go grab some honey in a little bit to sort of preserve my voice and keep it from wearing out, especially once we get to the loop station portion. But I think it's mostly just practice. So I'll continue to work through it. Because I feel like my lower register is fairly solid normally. It's just more endurance. That's what a lot of beatboxing is over time. We talked about muscle memory and consistency when it comes to technique, but a lot of it is endurance as well, which is what I've been trying to drill off stream. So when I get here on stream to work with stuff and talk to you guys, my voice and overall tool set doesn't get worn out as quickly. But it probably also depends on my head position too. If I have my head positioned a lot lower, which I guess the model sort of shows that, but not too much, it kind of compresses my throat, and I think that also puts stress on it. And I don't normally do that unless I'm having to talk into a mic. And that's probably something else I need to be aware of, not to sort of compress my vocal cords. So if I do that, that's gonna affect the ability to do some of the lower end basses. In fact, that'll probably affect it more than having headphones on. But we'll keep working on it, because I do want the sounds to be consistent. But that's why these are practice sessions for jam stream stuff. So we can continue to do some more pattern practice. In fact, I don't have my sound list up here, but that's fine. We'll just improvise and freestyle a little bit. Switch. Seemed like lower register was a little bit easier there. It could also be that my voice still needs time to warm up in some of those earlier patterns I was practicing. I know for my tool set in general, my face muscles and everything else usually warms up relatively quick, but my voice for things like the basses specifically tends to take a little bit longer to warm up. So I should probably spend a little more time on vocal warm-ups when I'm kicking the stream off and kind of ease into some of the more advanced stuff, because it was definitely easier that last run of patterns to do some of the lower ones. I just need to probably warm up and not push it quite so hard in the beginning, and then as everything sort of warms up, it'll be better. But again, it still comes down to endurance, practice, and conditioning. Let's see. All right, one thing I wanted to talk about from the sound practice and sound study that we've hit on a couple of the previous streams is the work in progress stuff, kind of like the hollow click that I've been drilling, is technicality or speed patterns. I've been continuing to drill some of the ones that I'm not as good at, and I did want to talk a little bit about some of that work I've been doing. We've touched on it on previous streams, so we'll go through it a little bit here. But like we've talked about before, the TKK, which is usually the standard for speed patterns people learn, or that one I'm still working on when I can. I think I'm pretty close to getting it leveled up to where it's even more quick and consistent. Right now, I can do it almost back-to-back consistently. If I were to just do it over and over again, it would sound like... It's not seamless, which is what people who've really got that sound mastered can do. They can just do it in like a machine gun, rapid fire, with no gaps in between. So I'm close. I'm probably maybe another month of practice away from being able to do that, and then from there it'll just be top speed and consistency. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about that I don't think we spent a lot of time discussing from a sound study perspective is the rim shot. And the rim shot's a snare. I don't use it in regular patterns a lot, but I need to remember that I have it in my arsenal because it's a very versatile and useful sound to have. And to explain a little bit, we've talked about it a long time ago now when we were introducing snares and basic sounds. The inwards case snare, which I use a lot, sounds like, and like we talked about before, that sound's created by sealing your tongue against the roof of your mouth so there's no inwards air at all, and then you inhale and then drop the back of your tongue at the same time to create this pop. It's a little bit difficult to describe the inwards K is a pretty tricky beginner sound that people spend a lot of time learning. But when you inhale and pop the back of your tongue down to release the pressure to allow you to inhale, that's how you get the and it's one of the most tricky sounds to master once you learn the basic muscle mechanics of it. And then from there, it's practicing it to get it clean. Because usually when people start, it's more breathy and not quite as crisp. So it may sound like until you get the muscle memory and technique consistency down to where it's a lot faster and sharper. And that's how you get the it's a really, really good snare, and it's a cornerstone sound for beatboxing. But the rim shot is basically a version of the inwards K that uses no inhaling. It's all using mouth pressure. And that sound took me forever to figure out after watching countless tutorials, because it's not a hard sound, but you kind of need to understand the mechanics of the rim shot in order to be able to do it. It's not something you can kind of brute force your way through. And I think it was just trial and error before I realized that it was an inward K without the inhaling, where you just create that same sort of seal with your tongue, and then you pop your tongue down from the back to get that same pop, but you're not bringing air in at the same time, so it's a little bit less punchy. So the rim shot sounds like very similar to the inwards K, but it's not as sharp because it doesn't have the air coming in behind it, essentially. If we were to compare them side by side, inwards K sounds like and rim shot sounds like it's a little bit more of a subdued sound. It's kind of like the front end of an inward K cut off, because again, it doesn't have that punch behind it. But what makes the rim shot useful is that it can be done very quickly, and that comes with a ton of practice. So to sort of illustrate, doing inwards K sounds in quote unquote rapid fire back to back sounds kind of like, which is pretty functional. I don't do that particular type of sound sequence a lot, but it's useful to have there ready to use. But the rim shot using back to back would sound like because it's not using air, it's just mouth pressure. Once you know the mouth position and your tongue, it's the muscle memory to be able to do that motion consistently. That's why people use the rim shot in speed patterns, because you can chain it into different sounds really quickly once you have the muscle memory and practice in order to do it. So the reason why I bring it up is because I've been trying to work the rim shot into a lot of other types of speed patterns that aren't just the TKK. And it functions well in place of a lot of other snares too. I just keep forgetting that you can use it that way, which is a shame, because it could probably lead to a lot more versatility and more options when it comes to sound construction. Like, I was messing around with just a real simple speed pattern drill for the rim shot, which is a drum and bass pattern. So like I was doing before, I tend to go to the PF snare for drum and bass, which is you're getting them. But you can swap the PF snare out for the rim shot, and you get a and it functions the same way, but it's a lot faster than the PF snare, so you can do a lot more around that sound. So what I was practicing, and I'll probably not do it too cleanly here, but I was practicing sort of a more complex drum and bass pattern, same rhythm as you were hearing before, but using the rim shot instead of a PF snare, and then kind of structuring hats around it. So if I should have written this down, I didn't, because I was doing it in the car. But for the rim shot drum and bass pattern, it was something like, and I do like the sort of contrast in the way sound construction works on that, because I can work in hats around a PF snare drum and bass pattern. It's definitely doable, but I feel like there's a bit more sort of time and space being monopolized by just the PF snare itself. So if we were to contrast and try and do the same sort of complex hats and everything around the PF snare and a drum and bass pattern, you get something like. But the overall speed is going to top out about where you hear it. You have all the different hats going around the PF snare, which is similar to the other one. But I don't think I could do it faster than that, because if I try, I could just try and see. If I were to go, it starts to get really muddy, really fast, and then eventually you're gonna lose the hats altogether. It's just gonna kind of blend into a mess, and you're not gonna hear it. But if you're doing that same pattern with the rim shot, I think the overall top speed, once you practice it, is potentially a lot higher, which is noteworthy because I'm not a speed beatboxer at all. I'm trying to get better at it. But some of the folks out there in the scene, like I talked about the Russian beatboxer Helium in previous streams, he specifically had a video of nothing but drum and bass patterns and technicality that he showed off for practice. And it was absolutely nuts what he was doing. And his case snare is a slightly modified case snare. It's different from the ones I've been doing. But combining that with his kicks and hats and everything else, again, I will show that video off at some point when we do media share stuff, because it's crazy how some of the top speed stuff can work once you're actually well practiced in technicality. So rim shot, I think, can be pretty useful. So in order to practice, I'm going to work with a little bit of speed and technicality pattern stuff right now using the rim shot, and we'll see what we can kind of get out of it. We'll see if we can push the speed a little, just to see how it hits for now, and then that'll be a good benchmark for the future as I continue to practice. Again, we'll do some rim shot practice right now. I just realized I am not good at regulating air when I'm using that technique. Because it's all mouth pressure, there's no inward or outward exchange of air like some of the other sounds. Like for the inwards K, you are getting a little bit of air, but it fits into sort of an inwards outwards pattern better. The rim shot does not do that because it's breathless. So when I was doing that really simple drum and bass rhythm, I wasn't breathing at all, and I couldn't find a good place to get air. So I'm going to have to think about that. We could do something like just an outward breath in between when we're doing the... and doing sort of the inwards breaths in between the snares, and at one point the air's got to leave your mouth or your lungs. So maybe just a quick outwards, just like a in between. That's tricky. I have never even thought about air regulation with rim shot. I guess that shows how seldom I use that particular sound. So that's good to know, because being able to do like the is good and all, but if you're going to do that from a sustained amount of time, not having a strategy of how you're going to do air exchange is going to make that pretty hard to use. So I will have to keep that in mind and start thinking about ways to work around that if I want to use that sound. And I do. For speed patterns specifically, it's not just spamming 3 sounds over and over again. You work technicality into pattern construction and overall songs and routines. You're not just throwing it out there just to sort of show off. So air regulation is going to be another one of the ongoing development things for speed and technicality. And I hadn't even thought before this particular stream to even consider that. Well, that's good. I think that pretty much wraps up the sound study and practice stuff I wanted to focus on today. We could spend more time just doing freestyle practice and working through patterns, but I do want to move on to the actual loop station stuff. So I'm going to put the headphones back on. That's a good question, Edward. The whooped inhale sound work in there. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out what sound you're talking about in regards to like how you'd fit into a speed pattern. Are you talking about the zipper or the? There's a couple different inward noises. It's just I'm trying to see from your description which one you're talking about in something that's really fast. Because if we're going with the problem with the rim shot is that it cuts off your airway when you're doing it for a brief second, so there's no consistent place to breathe in. So I think you'd have to manually fit it in between the actual beats. Let's see. Oh, well, the whistle or the that I was doing wouldn't necessarily work there because it's too slow. I think you just have to do sharp, really short breaths in between like the beginnings and starts of the different measures of the drum and bass parts and not break it up as much. Because if you were doing it slower, you could do something like an inwards lip roll. So if you're doing like a, let me see, how would I demonstrate that? Even that's not necessarily a good example because the whole problem with air control was specifically on that drum and bass pattern. For the rim shot in any other construction or any slower beat, you have no issue with air regulation because you can either use a combination of other technical sounds to get your air out. So you could do just like I was doing there when I went, that gets the air out, or you could even just push the air out in its own sound, breathing normally. When it's a super fast drum and bass pattern, you can't really do that. So that's where the challenge is coming from there. And I think what Helium just does is he just breathes in between his sounds really quickly. But that'll be something to think about. Maybe we can experiment with a drum and bass pattern on the loop station, since we don't have a BGM track that's drum and bass. They tend to be a little bit slower. But yeah, we're gonna call that speed pattern and rim shot air regulation thing a work in progress too. I'm gonna experiment around with some ideas for that, and maybe by the next jam stream we'll have some ideas on how to sort of work with that, because it's good practice for one, but I would like it to also be functional. But that's a good suggestion, Edward. I'll keep that in mind as far as options for air regulation. All right, I'm gonna jump onto a new track in the loop station. Oh, I'm gonna change my caption before I forget again. There we go. And let's see. We're on track. We're on. Sorry, I have to change my settings when I jump between loop tracks. There. That should do it. I gotta copy all the stuff into a new one real quick here. The problem with copying everything over is that it wipes the sound settings for when I was previously on. But I have it set about where it was before, so you guys should still be able to hear me okay. Let me know if it's too soft. You can also increase the gain on my mic as well, which I haven't been doing. But this one should be good to go. Bruh button's working. But for the loop station, there's some commands that I've been seeing in some tutorials that I've been watching. I should have written them down because it was the other day when I was watching these. But there's a couple that we haven't really been messing around with that I kind of want to experiment with for BGM purposes. And I think the best way to do that would be to set up a real simple sort of test beat and then mess around with the commands and see how they affect sounds, and then we'll remember that and apply it to future ones. So what I'm going to do, this will be kind of an experiment here before we actually get into the BGM brainstorming a little bit later. What I'm going to do first is set up a test beat, and then we'll start fiddling around with some of these commands that I've been meaning to look at and see if we can apply some of these things that we learned to the BGM stuff later. So let's do something a little bit mid-tempo, nothing too fast to start. Let's see, maybe something like all right. I think that'll work. Now let's get it recorded. All right. I have the fader volume set at about in the middle on this one. So let me know if you guys are having trouble hearing the BGM or the loop station stuff in the background, because I can up it pretty easily. All right, one of the commands I wanted to look at that we haven't really worked on a lot is the vocal distortion. And we can mess around with some settings. So if I were to turn it on low settings, it would sound like this. It's sort of a filter effect. Filter effect on mic input, but that sounds loud to me. All right, thanks, Edward. I'm gonna turn the track up a little bit. The background beat is hitting the top of the green range in OBS. So let me know if it's still hard to hear. But for vocal distortion, I know you can use it to create some really neat synth effects on your actual voice. So what I want to do is play around in the settings and see how it changes the way that sort of filter effect works. Because if I just turn it on normally, this is at about 75%. This is the effect you get, that kind of muddy distortion. And then much lower, it basically tones down a lot. But I know there's a way to make it so that, it distorts it so much that your voice essentially becomes like an instrument. And that's the effect I want, because I've seen some neat stuff with that. So let me tinker around in the settings and see, since I haven't really used this particular command at all. There's tone settings in here too. This is with tone up to about 50 and about 70%. Or this is about 60%. This is with it set at about 35, still at about 60%. The effect. Yeah, I'm gonna have to write down some of the settings from other folks that are using some of these commands, so I know how to actually duplicate the effects that they're creating. But that vocal distortion could work on something like a bass, which is not something we've really done so far. We usually use guitar to bass, or I'll do one of my regular created ones. But if we were to put that filter on, we might be able to do something that sort of mimics a guitar, the way that distortion sounds. So I want to try and experiment with adding some bass lines to our sample beat here, and just see how it sounds, how it comes out, and what it sounds like on the track. So let's see what we get. This is with vocal distortion on again. So if I just do a throat bass line, I wonder how it sounds with this filter on. That'd be like a I'm just looking for a spot to actually add in the bass line here. Alright, so the effect is sort of a more distorted filter over the actual bass itself. So I might not actually need to do a throat bass if I'm going to use the vocal distortion. Which is interesting. It's a good option to have. Well, what if we tried pairing it with some of these other effects? Right now I'm just on Dynamics and EQ, which is what I normally use for just creating the beats. we could do something like adding on delay, which is not something I've messed around with too much. But as you can tell from the way I'm just talking here, it creates a set time delay between the sound output and what's actually output from the loop station. Sorry, I'll turn it off so it doesn't screw up my talking. But I think you can do some really neat stuff with delay. And I need to work with some of these other commands a little bit more. But I wonder how we can apply that to a bass line using our sample beat here. So I'm going to turn on delay and then the vocal distortion and see if we can come up with an interesting bass line to add to the thing here, because I've never experimented with these combinations before. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to turn them on now. All right. So now we have both the distortion and the delay. So what it does is, I don't know how effective that's going to be for a bass line, but if we were trying to do a synth or an instrument sound, I get the feeling we could probably do some neat stuff with that combination of effects. But because a bass line tends to be either a sustained note or something that moves, it's probably going to be a little bit weird for an actual underlying set of notes on the bass line. So let me go back to EQ here. Let's set down our regular bass line and then see if we can do a third track and experiment around with some of these techniques. So I'm going to go back to guitar to bass just to do something simple. Let's see, about here. About here's where we normally do it. Real quick, I'm going to change one thing with the bass percussion line on the beat here. I'm going to make it one measure just to make it easier for me to experiment with here. So they'll do the same thing. It's the, but I'm going to make it one measure instead of, I think that was two measures. Try and get it to line up a little bit better. Unintentionally did a two measure repeat, sorry. All right, let's do it that way. There we go. Still off on the tail ends, so it's not looping quite as seamlessly. Yeah, I'm doing it like a half second too late. All right, that works. We're going a little bit faster apparently. It's fine. Now we can add a bass line to it. cleaner. Yeah, I'm gonna turn the bass down a little bit so it's not quite as distorted. All right, back on dynamics. Seeing the beat hitting yellow again. Hopefully it's audible enough and you can still hear me talking over it. All right, now let's see what we can add from using some of these other commands. We could add delay. What I really would like is a good way to add something that sounds a bit more like a synth. Oh, I know what we can look at. All right, let me stop the beat for a sec here. There's another filter or effect preset in here that I don't think we've looked at so far on the jam streams. And let me figure out which one it's on. It's not on channel B, so it must be on channel A. Ah, there it is. It's it's called Robot. And to demonstrate, I don't think I've looked at this one before.
You turn it on. Let me see if I can actually hear it. It adds a robot effect filter over your voice. And the higher you turn it up, the more it distorts.
But what I've seen, and I think this is the one I was thinking of. I've seen people use this in conjunction with some of the other commands to create this sort of synth sounds. And I think that has a lot of potential. So I want to kind of mess around with the robot effect, maybe in conjunction with something like delay. So for to do that,
You would get something. It would sound like this.
if we're doing like an actual synth melody, we could add both effects there to create something that is kind of like an echoey, repeating sounding synth line. And I've seen people do sort of like arpeggios or sort of an ascending or descending melody line using that. I guess we can kind of experiment around and see if we can make that work for our sound construction here and things like our BGM. And again, these are commands that I've never worked with. And we're kind of exploring the loop station functions a bit here. Yeah, that's right, Edward. The home roller voice is going to be more similar to the ring modulator command.
Which sounds like this. Also known as the Friday Night Funkin' character sound effect, but you could definitely use it in conjunction with something like Robot. In fact, I don't know what it sounds like when you combine.
I don't know what it sounds like if you combine those two at the same time. Let's test it out.
With ring modulator
and Robot at the same time. This is what it sounds like.
I think it pretty much makes it impossible to understand what I'm saying if I have both those effects on at the same time.
For Robot.
I guess we can mess around with the command and see if we can create an interesting synth line, and maybe we can construct the rest of the song around it, since I've seen people do that before too. I tend to do beat first and then bass line. What other loop station users do that's a lot more complex is they'll create the beat instrument at a time on one track. And I kind of demonstrated this before. I'm just not very good at it. But then they'll do that and create whatever. But another strategy is they'll create the synth line first to set the tempo, and then they'll create the bass or the beat next, and then the bass after that, and they'll add everything together. So you're essentially doing it in reverse, which is, to me, it seems like it'd be a lot harder. But we can kind of experiment around and see what results we get with that. So let's just start messing around with stuff and see where it goes. I'm gonna do Robot in conjunction with the delay and see if I can come up with a good synth line. I'm gonna have the effects on, so you guys won't be able to understand me unless I turn them off.
Like so. Turn the delay. Maybe make the delay about here. About here. It's about 50%. We make it lower. Yeah, about there. Maybe if we turn the Robot up to the max.
I'm going to experiment around with some combinations of rhythms for synths, and we'll see if anything using this particular combination of effects is functional for creating a song around. So again, this is mostly just experimenting. We'll see what happens. I may have it up a little high. What that does is that creates an interesting. That's more of a bass line than a synth, I think. But we could try and create a beat or a percussion line around just that repeated short sound bite and see what we get. So let's see, what would be a good tempo to kind of match up with the rhythm? I guess we can try and record something and see how it syncs. Again, I'm not used to creating tracks this way, so it's sort of a learning experience for me here. Maybe something like something like that. We have to make sure we we're looping it in sync with the rhythm. It's a little bit tricky. Again, my brain's not used to thinking backwards like this. Yeah. One thing that I think I've talked about a little bit before on these jam streams for the loop station, the way I understand how the hardware works, and I could be wrong, but the way it sort of maps how everything loops and it sets the overall BPM for the set of tracks in total depends on, I think it's the first thing that you record. So it sort of takes the measure and whatever you record, and it establishes a BPM based on that. Let me see. Because right now, based on that real simple, weird synthy bass thing that we did, it has an overall track BPM of 104 beats per minute. And if I were to delete that, it defaults the track BPM to 72. And I wonder if that's because the only other track I have, everything's cleared off right now. The only thing left is the bruh button. Bruh. And I didn't think about this before, but I wonder if it's auto defaulting the BPM to that track. Bruh. And if that's the case, then I may have been unintentionally making my job more difficult when I'm trying to create these loops. Let me delete that and see what it defaults to. Without the bruh button, it's defaulted to 81.5. So let's do a real simple one measure beat and then see what the actual mapped tempo for BPM snaps to. If it snaps to what I just did or if it sets it somewhere else. So let me do something kind of fast as a contrast. Maybe we can do a drum and bass lines or beat, since that's what we were talking about earlier. Something like, so let me record that. Let's see. Yeah, I think it is mapping it based on what it records, because now it says the BPM is set to 97. So that's That's an interesting thing to keep in mind as far as how the hardware is establishing the track BPM, because now I assume anything that I record is going to be following the same BPM as this percussion line that we've put down here. But I don't know that for a fact, so I'll have to continue to research that and make sure I understand how all of the recording is working. That's right, Edward. We will be stumbling upon many opportunities for bruh moments. That's why I put that button on there. But I guess now would be a good time to segue into BGM brainstorming. I've been going for, what, an hour and a half? Almost 2 hours? Time really flies on these jam streams. So let's do some brainstorming for ideas on BGM tracks. And maybe we can start with our drum and bass line here, since I did mention earlier on that I wanted to experiment around with a drum and bass BGM track, since we don't have one of those yet. So let me listen to this a little bit and see if I want to change anything before we start tinkering around with other components of the BGM track. I think the rhythm itself is fine. This was just kick, hats, and then the rim shot sound I was explaining earlier. That let's see. Let's think about some bass lines for adding to the drum and bass track. I was thinking kind of a sustained, maybe 2 or 3 note bass line that maybe goes for 1 note and then goes up and then down back to the same note again. And it's a bit more constant instead of something that would be a bit more rapid fire. So let me see if I can duplicate what I'm saying here. We'll use guitar to bass again. We'll keep it simple for this one. About here. So I was thinking if we do like a sustained note that maybe jumps up and comes down in like a 8th or 16th note. So let me experiment around and we'll see how it sounds. The rhythm on that one wasn't exactly on, but the actual progression, what I was thinking, was pretty accurate. So I'm gonna record. I'm gonna try and get that as close as possible and record, and we'll see what it sounds like with the combined with the beat. Maybe you could try it mid-measure too. I'm going to experiment with putting that bass line in a couple different places and we'll see what sounds best. Alright, because I did it in between the beat measures, that's why there's a delay on it. So let me see if I can snap it to the start of the measure so that it's in line with when the actual percussion's going, because I don't want it to have a delay, at least not on this one. There we go. Now they're synced, but I think I had the note break a little bit on the bass line. It's not clean. So let me see if I can fix that, but I think this particular rhythm and set of notes for the bass line is functional for accompanying the drum and bass. So let me see if I can get it recorded a little bit more clean. Bass on? All right. Alright, I'm just adjusting the track volume a little bit here. Alright, got dynamics back on for my mic. Let me save our progress so far. Do not want to lose any work that we do here. Wouldn't mind having some sort of accompanying third track, excuse me, with the overall beat here. And I wonder if we can create something with the robot voice.
Testing. Get it up here. We could do, let's see.
I just had another idea. I'm gonna go back to the ring modulator command. I was thinking maybe do something kind of like a wow type of sound as the third track on here. And we've done something similar to that in the past using the ring modulator command. So let me see if I can demonstrate what I'm talking about here. Alright, I'm gonna turn on the filter effect and we'll see. Thinking just like a two note variance between the kind of wow noise. Let me see if I can get what I'm talking about here. Well, rhythm and note wise, that's what I was trying to do, but I'm trying to decide if it's too distracting. It's a little bit kind of distracting as a third track. I think it's also slightly off rhythm. It's close. It's not jarringly off, but it might be off by like a quarter second. I'm gonna keep the volume on that one a little bit low, and then I'll decide later if I want to keep it. Okay. Oh, Edward, are you talking about the third track with the ring modulator that I just added? I'm fairly certain someone out there in the drum and bass scene has done something that sounds like what I've got here. As we do these BGM brainstorming sessions, I'm gonna be curious to see if I either inadvertently or by accident create something that is identical or disturbingly similar to something somebody else out in the music scene has created. I listen to a lot of music, but I would never intentionally try and duplicate something that someone's done, because I don't want to get sued. We saw that with the Hit the Road incident from previous streams. Oh, yeah. I get you, Edward. I think we have probably at least two other tracks that we've done that have that ring modulator fluctuation on there. You're right. We're exploring the use of that command, and I've applied it to at least 2 or 3 tracks so far. So that alone is a good reason to not include it here, I think, because we don't want these all sounding the same. Thanks for bringing that up. I still want to put something on that third track, so I'm gonna think about that for a second here. But what I wanted to do to play around with the track progression is apply some of the track effects, not the input effects here. And I think what I want to do is not have the bass line affected by what I'm about to experiment with here. So let's try turn on beat scatter. Okay. Beat scatter, again, that it rearranges and sort of mixes the whatever it applies to on the effect. This is what it sounds like to have beat scatter applied to just the percussion line, not the bass line. And honestly, it doesn't sound dramatically different to me. Let's try the other patterns. Okay, that's definitely different. This is pattern 3. That's different, but I don't think it sounds good. It sounds like the playback is glitched. Oh, it could also be because I have the knob turned all the way up on the beat scatter effect. This is the same pattern 3 again, but I'm turning the scatter effect down a little bit. This is at about 60%. This is 50%. Pattern 4 at 50%. This is at about 60. This basically does like a drop build up and changes that on the actual beat. Which if we wanted to have that just on demand, instead of having to use beat repeat and then change it, we could do that. What I mean by that is, if this is what the beat sounds like normally. If I just turn on beat scatter, then it's basically like a measure, an additional measure of a different beat, and then you turn it off. This is at 50 again. And that was at like 90%. I did that completely by accident, but I think it actually sounds kind of cool. Hold up. Okay, there's not much difference between 90 and 100% for that particular preset. But I kind of like having that scatter effect as a switch up in the actual song. So if we were thinking about it from a sound progression in the BGM track here, we could have the regular drum and bass pattern repeat for several measures, and then we could switch it up just by turning on beat scatter. So let me turn everything off first. If we were to think about how we're constructing it in theory, we could do something like start with the beat. So have that go for a few measures. Add the bass. Maybe like a 4-measure repeat. And then we switch it up. And then we take it off and go back to the regular one. I was messing around with the tape echo effect, which basically adds kind of a reverb echoing sound to the whole track. At 50% it sounds like this. This is with the repeat rate set down to 0. This is with the effect set up to about 60%. What I think would be cool for the drum and bass one here, this one may be structured a little differently than some of the other ones we've done. Would it be possible to have the bass come in at the changing note part? You mean to have it? Let me drop the track down so I can hear. You're talking about having the bass start, instead of having the sustained note in the beginning, have it start at the note change. So it would be note changing at the beginning of the measure instead of having it sustained for like one repeat on the rhythm and then changing. It would be possible to do that, but I'd have to re-record it because the way the loop is aligned to the track has it with the sustained note first, and unfortunately the hardware, as far as I know, doesn't let you change where the loop starts and stops. It does it based on how it records what you did. But what you're saying sounds like you would have the up, the down, the up down part at the beginning and then sustain after. So it's basically flipping it, right? I wonder if you could just reverse it. That might work. You do have the ability to do that with tracks. Here, let me try. If not, I could just record an alternate version of the bass line. That's not hard. But let's see if we can flip it. Because that's basically putting the entire bass line backwards. Oh, yeah, that's not going to work for the reverse because it's actually reversing the notes. It's not just the order of the track, it's reversing the note progression too. But if I understand what you're saying, I can try and re-record and we do an alternate kind of thing here. Let me turn track 2 off. So from what you're saying, Edward, you're talking about something that goes like this. And then it's going to repeat with the note change at the beginning of the measure instead of at the end. Right? Is that what you're talking about? That should be easy enough to record. I'll put that on track 4, and then we'll see if I've accurately captured what you're saying here. It didn't record the way I wanted to, but let me check my settings here. All right, let me try that again. I'm not getting it quite on the start of the loop. I see what you're talking about, Edward. Yeah. Because the track is essentially looping a recorded bit over and over again, what it does is it's just playing it from start to finish over and over again, and you can't have it start at different parts in the recorded section. It'd be kind of neat if you could do that, but you basically have to record, you'd have to record the way you want it in order for it to be aligned properly with the tracks. This particular hardware doesn't have the flexibility to do that. It's just taking whatever you record in the set amount of time you push the record button, and then it's looping that over and over again and I can choose when I can turn it on and off, but I can't choose where in the recorded bit it starts, if that makes sense. So what I'm attempting to do here, and for some reason I'm missing my actual tempo start. I think I need to do it at 50%. I'm trying to record an alt version of that bass line with the note transition at the front and then having it drop down and sustain. Basically, it's the reverse of the one we did before. So let me see if I can at least get that here and we can compare it. For some reason it's taking just the first note and it's looping that. I wonder if it's, let's see. Yeah, I think I'm just not timing it correctly. Let me keep trying. That was the right rhythm and notes, but I need to sustain it out through a full repeat of the percussion line. That's a little bit closer to what I was imagining there. It's not exact. I think it potentially needs to be extended out for another measure to reach the end. If we compare that to the first one that we did. Start the track completely over. So if we were to turn it on, we'd have just the beat first. And what I was thinking when we were looking at the track effects, in the first bass line, it sounds like there's two notes after the changing part. Yes, that's technically correct. That wasn't what I was attempting to do. I think it's because my voice wavered a little bit towards the end. What I was trying to do was have it be one note, then the change, and then a sustained note. But I could tell from what you're saying that it sounds like it breaks up kind of in between. It's like a half note. That wasn't intentional. I wanted it to go, turn it off. I wanted it to go just a, but I think my voice wavered a little bit, so it broke up the end after the transition, so it sounds like there's two notes there. I could change it, but I have to re-record the actual bass line. But you're correct, Edward, in what you're hearing. The way it came out when I recorded it, it does sound like there's two notes between the transition and the end of the phrase before the bass line stops. I don't know that it necessarily affects the song too much. But what I was thinking for the track effects, if we just focus on these two tracks we've got recorded so far. Trying to think of the math to move, or of how to move the notes around to have the change part at the start. Well, let's look at that. Turn everything off for a second. So I didn't do a very good job of trying to record the alt version of the bass line that has the transition at the beginning. But it would largely depend on if what you're thinking has the transition at the beginning and then the sustained note all the way to the end of the measure of the rhythm before it repeats, or if you have it go to about, 3 of the 4 measures and then having a stop. Because the way I recorded this first one just by itself, the way I recorded that one, I cut it off intentionally before the end of the final measure of the rhythm, so that you have the bass going and then it stops for one measure before the whole thing repeats again. I did that on purpose. Now, if I wanted to, I'd have to re-record it again, but if I wanted to, I could have it go all the way through so that there's no gap in the bass line ever, but that's not what I was trying to do when I recorded it the first time. If we were re-recording the bass line with the transition at the beginning, that's not hard to do, but we'd have to decide if we want the sustained note, which is coming after the 2-note, 3-note, whatever transition, if we wanted it to just stay all the way through or to drop off at the end, before the end of the final repeat of the rhythm. Because we could have it go constant. All I'd have to do is just sing the note for a couple seconds longer, and then it would never drop out. It would be constant. That is an option. That's what I was trying to do before. I still have the other one I recorded. But it's essentially one measure repeat instead of sustaining the final note all the way through the entire rhythm. I cut it off early just to see if we can get it captured accurately. So the question largely comes down to what you think would sound better if we wanted it to have the transition beginning, which again we can do, but how long we want the sustained note to go for. Because one thing I did it again, even though I wasn't trying. The rhythm by itself, if we were to play it, it's 2 measures. It repeats twice. So that makes it a little bit difficult when trying to record additional parts, because I have to essentially make sure it's syncing up with a 2-measure repeated loop instead of a 1-measure repeated loop. And if I wanted to, I could clear all this off and then just record 1 measure of the drum and bass part. That would probably make this whole experiment a lot easier if I did that, because then I'm essentially recording 1 measure repeats of everything. And if I want to make it longer, I can make it go longer. But now I've got a 2-measure repeat and I'm trying to sync everything up to a 2-measure. And that's what's kind of making things complicated, I think. Because if I just went for the, actually let's do this. We can experiment around without losing any of our work. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to save a new one on a new track. And we can actually jump over to this new track. We've got everything that we've just did, including the kind of wonky alternate bass line we're experimenting with. But I wonder if I can just delete the beat track, leave the bass lines, and record the beat again. Let's see. I might not be able to do that, but we can see what happens. So cleared off track 1, which was just the percussion. Bass lines are still there. let me try and record a one measure repeat of the drum and bass line. We'll see if it screws with anything else we're doing here. So that's going to be the only repeat instead of doing it twice. That may have been slightly too fast. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's too fast. No, it's not extra work, Edward. I think it's a really neat experiment, and I'm kind of curious to see if we can figure out how to make what you're talking about work, and then that'll actually be a really good learning point in the future when we're trying to adjust things on the fly like this. So that's not a problem. Again, I've copied things in different files, so even if this particular experiment doesn't work, we still have all the stuff we were just doing. So don't worry about that. Let me see if I can get that one measure repeat rhythm recorded accurately here. I'm going to do it while I'm listening to the bass line. I think I have the rhythm. Let me just try and record it again and not have it be too fast. Oh, did it to repeat again? It did to repeat again. That's not what I was trying to do. Oh, I know what it's doing. It's seeing the... Okay, my mistake. Because the bass lines and everything else we recorded was on a 2-measure repeat, now the beat is snapping to the bass line. And I'm doing it one cycle, but it's doing it twice in one because the quote unquote default length of the loop track is 2 measures. So that's actually good to know. So let's do this. I still want to experiment around with your idea, Edward. So I'm going to clear everything off, and we're going to start completely from scratch. This won't take long. And I'm going to do 1 measure repeat of the bass, and then a bass line, and then we'll re-record the basses and see if we can snap easier to a 1 measure repeat. We're doing it from scratch, and it's going to be 1 measure now. So that should make things easier. Let's see. Okay, that'll do. Just need to get it recorded properly. Actually, let me try something slightly different. I keep thinking of the bass, the single segment of the rhythm as the, but really that's a 2 repeat by default, so I may have just been confusing myself. It should just be a, and that part loops over and over again. So let me do that. And then just time it correctly. Yeah, okay. Let's see. It's a little bit difficult. I think I can get it to loop so that it's doing it on the beat. If not, we may be stuck to a 2 measure repeat, and then it ultimately didn't matter. But we'll see. I'm still gonna figure it out. That's not what I wanted. that's interesting. So when you record a set of sounds and when you turn off the actual record and hit the button, it basically has an overdub feature that allows you to record on top of what you just did if you wanted. And what I'm trying to do is do it in one, but it may be possible to just overdub it and have it sort of sync up. I've never actually experimented with this. This is the first time I'm doing this at all with the loop station. So let me try and think of it like an overdub. Yep. That's exactly the way that works. So I record the initial part and then it starts playing that back for me. And then before I completely turn off the recording, I can add something else in overdub before it completes the loop. So in theory, we should be able to do the full amount of repeats for the drum and bass rhythm in one track. But the way we're doing it's different from the way I've been recording it. So let me see if I can figure that out. Yeah, that didn't give me enough room to do it. Yeah, that was a test. If I were to do it using overdub, I could create the same rhythm, but it would still be 2 measures. Because the whole rhythm section, I think I was right the first time. The whole rhythm section that we want isn't just the, it's, so it is 2 repeats of the same set of rhythm notes, but the actual section that we want it to loop over and over again is longer. It's a 2 repeat because that's what the drum and bass rhythm is. So that's interesting. But to Edward's point about switching up the bass line and trying to get the note change to sync to the beginning, I still think we can try and do that for creating the whole thing from scratch, and that's fine. So let's redo the beat and then try and do the bass line snap to that particular rhythm repeat and see if it works. Now let's mess around with the alt version of the bass line and see. Guitar to bass. All right, I have an idea on how to get this to sync properly. Let's see if I do it correctly. All right, that's what we want. What I did was just to see if it made a difference, I started the beat and the recording for the bass line at the exact same time. I started them both by pushing both buttons at once. I don't necessarily think it solved the problem because I still had a slight delay and it was off, but you could still try and record it manually. Basically, I need to time it correctly and then have it extend the full measure of the repeat for the beat. interesting. I'm not entirely sure why if I miss the start of the actual measure, instead of it just starting it in between and then looping that, it kind of just repeats the whole thing over and over again. I'm gonna have to research into why the loop station does that automatically, because obviously I don't understand how the recording works if it's out of sync with where the loops start. Let's see. That time I tried having it come in right at the tail end before it starts over just to see what it would do, and had the same problem. So I think I need to actually have it synced to start at the same time. Let's try that again. That's with the repeat, basically 2 measures and stretched over that 2 measures. I think as far as having that change on the front end of the actual repeat, it's very likely that's as close as we're going to potentially get on that particular version of the bass line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop that. I'm going to save this version in its own track where we copied it. And I'm going to tinker around with that a little bit, because what I want to do before we wrap up is mess around with the track inputs and how we can switch up the overall rhythm. And just for the sake of experimenting with the song layout for the BGM, I'm going to do it based on the first bass line, since that one we know syncs. And then I will see if I can come up with a way to make that alt version work the way we're trying. I'm sure there's a way to do it, and it's just escaping me at the moment. But I do want to have sort of a rough outline of this particular BGM track, at least version alpha. That way we can take the structure, and if it works and I get the alt version working, I can apply all these different effects to that too. So what we're going to do is do sort of a rough run through of the track progression again with that first bass line, and I'm going to apply the track effects that we were talking about before, if I can remember where we had them set, and see, because I think there's some really neat rhythm changes that we can do with this drum and bass BGM track and have it switch up a little bit, and all it is just taking the track effects on and taking them off. But in the meantime, what I think we should do, since again I got to wrap up soon, we need to come up with a name for this thing. So while I'm experimenting with the track effects, be thinking about a good name for this thing. All right. So again, this is a rough run through of how the actual structure of the track's going to look. So we start with the rhythm. Add in bass. This is the section where we would have the beat scatter. Go back to the regular rhythm. Or in fact, after we come out of the switch up, we can add the tape echo after that. So if we have the tape echo at about 60%, then that should be enough reverb to switch things up and not sound too jarring. So again, let's back up a couple points in the song. Go into beat repeat or scatter. That transition to have the scatter come into effect right when the other one ends is going to be tricky because I have to move the knob. I have to move it from 100% to 60. Actually, I can move it to 50. I'm just messing around with the transition, seeing if I can get it cleaner. Yeah, I think 50 on them. The echo is gonna be a little bit less intrusive. I don't think I want to do a drop for this one. I was thinking about switching the input track or track effect A to have the beat repeat and then doing a drop. The problem is I'd have to really quickly on the fly change the baseline track to be able to have the track effects apply, because right now it doesn't. It's just the rhythm. And I could do that, but I'd have to do it really quickly and not screw it up. Alright, Edward. Thinking a title with run or running somewhere in it. Yeah, that's good. I was just thinking, while we're listening to the track here, we could call it run and bass. Or running bass. I was thinking like a pun on drum and bass. We called it run and bass. How do we feel about puns? That's interesting. What I was playing around with there on the rhythm switch up is adding the ring modulator filter, and what it does is it creates this like sonar echo, which is kind of cool. This is with the ring modulator at about 55%. I know it wasn't necessarily what we talked about when we were trying to get the layout for how we're switching things up, but I kind of like that effect. What if we did something like this? Let's run with that idea a little bit. I'm glad you appreciate puns, Edward. I'm trying to make Ina proud from Hololive. Since one thing that I'm working on, per some feedback from previous streams when we've been working on BGM creation, is extending out the overall length of the BGM tracks. One, just so that there's more and it's not necessarily quite so choppy. But to that effect, doing 2 different repeats of the song and then switching up the actual effects, I think would be pretty neat. So let's do another kind of run from the top here. Just stop. Turn that off. I'm gonna have to remember where I have all the settings here. So if we did from the top, I'm thinking like a 4 measure repeat in between each time something either adds or changes. So I guess that's technically 8. All right. 8 measure repeat. Now I add the bass. I think we're gonna go 8 and 8. Okay, and come out with the echo on. And now we're gonna go into another repeat. Okay, I accidentally missed a button. So let's back up in the track here. Stop. Here's what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So we're gonna start like we're coming straight out of the first rhythm switch up where the echo kicks in. So that's the part that I'm starting on here for the experiment. I'm gonna let it go for 8 repeats, just like we did the first time. But when it goes back to the switch up, I'm gonna do beat scatter, but with the ring modulator on, and I'm gonna hope I get the settings right on the first try because this is gonna be a little tricky. But that kind of sonar echo thing, I want that to be the rhythm switch up on the second repeat of the song. So we're starting quote unquote at the midpoint. And let's see if I can actually do this correctly. So switch. I'm thinking this note is where I want to start. And then maybe for the sort of outro of the song, we finish with a repeat of just the rhythm with no bass line attached to it. I'll have to fiddle around with that and see how I like the end results. But I think that might work for the overall structure of the song. Now, what I can do in recording, it doesn't necessarily need to be all done in one take, as it were. I can record things like the second switch up of the rhythm and the sonar effect. So I can start. And then I can have it start wherever I need it to and then just edit it all together. That's not really a problem. I don't need to, like I said, do it in one take. If I add the tape echo effect, if I just turn them all on at once, then actually I'm going to leave that on there because it makes it sound like this kind of sonar signal is echoing, which is the intended effect. Now, one thing that I may have to do on this, I will mess around with it in post and see if it's a big enough deal that I need to go in and record. Kind of like what Edward mentioned before on the number of notes in the bass line. The beginning of it, before it transitions, it was meant to be a sustained note. But because my voice wavered a little bit, it breaks up a little bit, so it sounds like do 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 do. What I was intending to do with that was to make it be constant. So without the effect on it, I wanted it to sound like do do. So the only difference in notes is when it changes, and then it's going back down to the sustained note on the front end and the back end. But because my voice wavered in the recording, it didn't do that. So I may go back and re-record it so that it fits, because when it's in this sort of effect mode, the problem with it is when it's in that mode and you can prominently hear the bass line, it sounds like there's specific broken up notes on the bass line in addition to where it changes. And I think that's a little off rhythm with what I was intending to do. So I may go back and re-record that and fix it. Hey, what's up, The Shadow? Welcome to the jam stream. We are finishing up some prototype work on a stream BGM track for future use. I was messing around with a variation on the drum and bass rhythm and track that we had up to this point. So I'm going to the point about the bass line, I'm going to have to think about that. And if it's, can I make my bass? Which one? Which one specifically? Are you talking about the bass on the actual track that we have recorded, or one of like my actual generated basses from my mouth? Because what we got here was using the guitar to bass preset effect from the loop station I'm working on. So that's this one that you hear here. Oh, my favorite bass in general when it comes to beatboxing? Sort of depends on my mood, but my favorite's probably either vibration bass or vocalized chest. And my voice is a little bit tired because we've been going for almost 3 hours. But for vibration bass, take my headphones off. Vibration bass, my favorite one would be something like if I were to do our bass line that we had recorded in loop station, it'd be Or if we're doing vocalized chest bass, it'd be whoa, 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 whoa. But yeah, I'd say it's sort of a toss up between either vibration or vocalized chest, depending on what I'm working on. I think I'm probably able to get a bit lower tones on vibration bass compared to vocalized chest. Just get a bit more of a resonation of the vocal cords. So that usually I'll pair that with something like a BMG for like a demon bass. Do I know demon bass? Demon bass is inwards, right? I don't know demon bass, and if it's because it's inwards, it's because I can't do inwards bass at all. That is the biggest work in progress beatboxing sound that is on my list. But demon bass is cool. I think Thomas Acre is known for his demon bass. It's a really heavy variation on some of the other ones. Yeah, exactly. That one, I'm pretty sure demon bass is inwards. I'd have to look. It's awesome. It's heavy in sound. Really good for drops, dubstep, and has that kind of heavy kind of synth distorted noise to it. It's good. At some point, once I get my head around some of the other more advanced basses, that's one I'd like to learn as well. Problem is, I sometimes people use different terminology for different things, even though they mean the same thing. Because I've heard evil bass, I've heard demon bass. I don't know if that's the same technique off the top of my head, but those variations on really heavy bass techniques are definitely something that I'd want to learn. It seems like it's kind of a developing technique to learn and master. Once you know how the sounds are created, it's just practicing and refining it. For inward bass, again, it's one that haunts me the most of the sounds I'm trying to learn. A lot of it, once you learn the technique, is getting clean and consistent. The two words I always use when we're talking about beatboxing stuff on stream here. But I will definitely keep that one on my list for things to learn. Another one that I want to learn that I've watched tutorials for and I'm still trying to understand it is a poly sub bass or alien bass. The guy from the Netherlands, Indicator, in his I'm an Alien routine, his bass is a unique poly sub bass, which is different from like a vibration bass, even though they sound very similar. The way they're created uses subharmonic notes for his, and it creates a subharmonic layering on top of the actual bass lines he's doing, as opposed to vibration, which is resonance using vocal cords. And it's vibration bass, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, is basically low throat bass with open vocal cords for resonation. A poly sub bass actually uses really low sung notes. Yeah, Indicator's bass is filthy. It's so cool, but I haven't figured out how to do it because I can't really do subharmonic singing notes. But he did a tutorial on it, and it's a really detailed tutorial. I just need to watch it more. But like, I feel like if you wanted to do like an imitation alien bass, you could just do like a low vibration bass. Like, his whole thing is he says I'm an alien and he uses his alien bass. If you did it with vibration, you get something like I'm an alien. Of course, my voice is shot after almost 3 hours. But if you just I'm an alien, you can use vibration bass, get close, but it's not the same. If you were listening to my poor attempt to force out a vibration bass in my throat, and his version of the poly sub alien bass that he does, his has more of like a rumbling resonance on it, but it doesn't sound like it's coming from the vocal cords flapping, essentially. Oh, no worries, The Shadow. Your English is fine, man. Shout outs to Germany. I don't know where a lot of my viewers are from because I never ask, but you might be the first person from Germany to tune in and hang out. So that's cool. I take it from your questions that you're a beatboxer yourself. So that's awesome. I love talking to other beatboxers that are out there in the scene. I'm sure for folks that are tuning in normally, I don't know, Edward, if you're a beatboxer, but you've been hanging around the streams long enough to at least be familiar with some of the stuff we've been talking about. But yeah, bass theory and bass study is okay. Beatboxing for half a year. Nice. Oh, okay, Edward. I had to ask, but you have probably a better passing knowledge of beatbox and beatbox theory compared to someone who's never heard of it before. So even if you're not a beatboxer yourself, then if someone were to ask you a question about it on the street, you could at least speak to it. So there's that. But one thing that's always interesting when it comes to people and their beatboxing path as they're learning comes down to where they started and what they chose to focus on when they started learning beatboxing. I'm just adjusting my mic settings real quick. Because beatboxing, unless you're taking a class or something from pros out in the scene, you basically have the freedom to choose wherever you want to learn and start learning. I've always adhered to well-known beatboxer from France, Collapse, who's one of my favorites. His emphasis on basics and starting and getting a good foundation of basics is a good way to learn, but that doesn't mean you have to do that. A lot of things in beatboxing, I've talked a little bit about this before, but a lot of things in beatboxing build off of the fundamentals and basics. So if you start with the basics, then it gets easier later. But that doesn't mean you have to do that. If you want to try and learn some of the crazy basses or more advanced things, you can. It just may be a harder entry point when you're getting started. Versus if you start from the simple stuff, just like boots and cats, like they always say, start there, and then a lot of the other things will build on that in some capacity. So it largely just depends on how someone wants to learn. For the Shadow, do I know the routine from Codfish? Is Peter Pan a dead man? If he's done it at an event, I've probably seen it. I do like Codfish. I don't really know him from his, beatboxing online in video games. Was it Call of Duty, I'm assuming, and whatnot. I know him more for his more recent events and competition stuff that he's done. But I think I've heard that routine before. His song covers are pretty crazy. That's what I remember the most that he's done, either on stage GBB or in other things where he's done his own arrangements or covers of existing songs. The dude's crazy. I don't know if he's going to be participating in this year's Grand Beatbox, which is coming up. Can't remember when it is. It might be this month. But yeah, Codfish is good. He's one of the more music-oriented and, I guess, melody-oriented beatboxers. He's got a pretty good mastery of all different aspects. That's why he was the champ a couple of years ago. But yeah, learning routines from other beatboxers is also a really good way to learn. It's gonna show you techniques and the way some of the pros out there in the scene put stuff together. Yeah, the Shadow. GBB is kind of the premier event for at least the national beatboxing scene. I would like to be able to attend that at some point. If we weren't still in a COVID environment, it would be easier. But for next year, we'll see. I definitely plan on watching the event this year. I need to go and figure out when it is, because I wanted to do sort of a watching stream where I can watch the event in real time and talk about it with folks that tune into the stream. So I need to go and nail down the dates, figure out when that is. I think it'd be fun to watch people out there that are competing on the stage, out there in the pro scene, and take a look at what they're doing. what I will do is I'm going to save what I'm working on here. Oh, what time is it, the Shadow, where I'm at? I'm in the United States on the West Coast, so it's about 3:30 Pacific time where I'm at, which is timely because I need to go and hit the road in a minute here. Yeah, that's a good question, Edward. For the Shadow, since you're a beatboxer, do you have any content on your channel? If you have stuff that you've been working on, then okay, that's cool, man. Don't worry about it. That's a good question. If people are out there doing their own thing, I have no problem shouting them out here on stream. I don't know if this is the first time I've seen you on one of these jam streams. We've done several of them, so I have really bad memory. But we've done a lot of discussion on beatbox theory and technique in the previous jam streams over on the channel in the archives. If you're curious about what we talk about or any of the stuff I've worked through or some of the other loop station things we've done, the whole point of the loop station exercise that we're doing here, that we're finishing up, is to create background music tracks for me to use on the stream. And whenever we're doing these jam stream sessions and we're brainstorming ideas for BGM, then I'm working with you guys in chat to come up with stuff. That's kind of a fun thing that I do here on these jam streams. So if you tune into some things like my just chatting or chill streams and you hear the background tracks that are looping, then that's where they come from. They come from these sessions. Oh, that's cool, Shadow. I don't know anybody personally that beatboxes. I know there's a scene where I live, but again, COVID times, it's not like I can go out and just talk to people. But there are good online communities, and I've jumped around in Discord servers a bit. I'm kind of busy, so I don't have a ton of time to sit on Discord. But if you have friends that are down to learn, then more power to you, man. Just out there and spread the good word. Do I know VR chat? I do. I've never been on it. I don't have the hardware for VR chat, but I know it's a pretty diverse scene out there. It wouldn't surprise me if there's beatboxing groups out there on VR chat. That seems like it'd be an interesting avenue to meet and hang out with people in the scene as well. But we will go ahead and start wrapping up the jam stream for today. What I've done is I've saved our loops, the loop that we were working on for run and bass, the prototype. Like I told the chat earlier, I will experiment around with that alt version and see if I can get it to work. But I think we've got a pretty good structure for the first version. I will have to devote some time to record some of these. I'm several tracks behind, but I will get them recorded and put together for the next chill stream. Yeah. The Shadow. I know you could play VR chat on PC or laptop. I'm working on a PC now. I just don't. Don't you need a headset or some sort of like VR camera in order to do that? I haven't looked into it too much. I've just sort of seen other people's. Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Well, I may have to look into that in the future. Okay, I got you. I didn't know that. Well, I'll have to think about that. We will make a mental note. What? In the meantime, like I said, I gotta go take off and hit the road in a minute here. yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other beatboxers on VR chat too. That doesn't surprise me. That would be something cool to check out. So yeah, we'll keep that in mind. But yeah, once again to wrap up, again, this may be a record-setting jam stream. I don't normally do these for 3 hours, but it was pretty fun experimenting with. Oh yes, Edward, my bad. Yes, pound the pavement. I would not like to be sued by the people who own the phrase "hit the road." But I didn't say "hit the road, Jack." Anyway, we're gonna wrap up for the day. Thanks again to you guys for coming by and hanging out. The Shadow, if this was your first one, hopefully we'll see you on future streams. Always down to talk to people out there in the beatbox scene. So once again, welcome. But yeah, I'll be working on the stream schedule for next week. I haven't figured out what days I'm gonna be getting on or what streams we'll be doing. But once I figure that out, it'll go up on Twitter like usual. So in the meantime, I will catch you guys later. Have a good afternoon /evening /morning wherever you're at. Peace.